Keisha's hand freezes on the doorknob. Through the frosted glass, a white man clutches a limp child wrapped in a soaked blanket. Snow swirls violently behind them. His lips move, but the wind drowns his words. Her mind screams warnings. Last month, 3 streets over, a black man opened his door to strangers and ended up arrested when they claimed he threatened them. She glances at her own sleeping son upstairs. Everything in her neighborhood teaches one lesson: helping the wrong person destroys everything. The man collapses against her door. She turns the lock. Keisha opens the door, and the blast of frigid air hits her face like a slap. The man stumbles forward, nearly falling into her small foyer, his arms wrapped desperately around a little girl whose face is pale as moonlight. Snow clings to their clothes, melting immediately in the warmth of the house, creating puddles on Keisha's worn linoleum floor. The child's lips have a bluish tint that sends alarm bells ringing through Keisha's mind. Her maternal instincts overriding every warning, her survival instincts are screaming. The man is shaking so hard he can barely speak, his teeth chattering violently as he tries to form words. Please. He finally manages, my daughter. She's burning up. Our car. It went off the road. 2 miles back. Phone died. We've been walking. Please help us. Keisha doesn't waste time with more questions. She guides them quickly into her living room. The small space dominated by a threadbare couch she bought secondhand 3 years ago, and a television that only works when you hit it just right. She grabs blankets from the hall closet. Thick ones she'd been saving for when the heat inevitably gets shut off again, and wraps them around the shivering pair. The little girl is barely conscious, her eyes rolling back, and when Keisha touches her forehead, the heat radiating from her skin is terrifying. She's seen fevers before. Her own son, Marcus, had pneumonia 2 winters ago. But this feels different, more urgent. What's your name? Keisha asks the man as she rushes to her kitchen to put water on for tea. David, he says, his voice hoarse. David Ashford. And this is Emma. She's 7. She was fine this morning, but then she started coughing, and by this afternoon she couldn't breathe right. Keisha nods, filling her electric kettle, one of the few appliances that still works reliably in her kitchen. David doesn't elaborate on who he is beyond his name. Doesn't mention wealth or status, or anything that would set him apart from any other desperate father. She brings them mugs of hot tea, herbal because it's all she has, and watches as David tries to get Emma to take small sips. The girl's breathing is shallow and raspy, a sound Keisha knows too well. She grabs her phone and dials 911, explaining the situation to the dispatcher, who sounds exhausted and overwhelmed. Mom, we're getting hundreds of calls. The dispatcher says, the storm has shut down half the city. Ambulances are running 3 to 4 hours behind. Is the child in immediate danger? Keisha looks at Emma's blue lips, her labored breathing, and says, yes, she needs help now. The dispatcher promises to send someone as soon as possible, but can't guarantee when that will be. Keisha hangs up and looks at David, seeing the terror in his eyes, and makes a decision. Her grandmother, rest her soul, had taught her how to handle fevers when hospitals were too expensive or too far away. She goes to her bathroom and comes back with a thermometer, pressing it gently to Emma's forehead. 104.3 degrees. Dangerous territory. She soaks a washcloth in cool water, not cold, because that could send the child into shock, and places it on Emma's forehead. She instructs David to keep replacing it every few minutes. She finds children's fever reducer in her medicine cabinet, left over from Marcus' last illness, and carefully measures out the correct dose based on Emma's weight. David watches her with a mixture of gratitude and amazement, accepting the medicine and coaxing his daughter to swallow it. Thank you, he keeps saying. Thank you. I don't know what we would have done. Thank you. Keisha notices his watch then, a flash of silver and crystal that looks expensive even in the dim light of her living room, and David catches her looking, quickly pulling his sleeve down to cover it. She doesn't comment, just continues monitoring Emma, checking her temperature every 15 minutes, keeping her hydrated with small sips of water mixed with a pinch of sugar and salt for electrolytes. Upstairs, she hears a creak, and then small footsteps on the stairs. Marcus appears in his Superman pajamas, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Mama, he says, confusion in his voice. Who are they? Keisha goes to him, kneeling down to his level, and explains in simple terms that these people needed help in the storm, that the little girl is sick, and that they'll be here until an ambulance comes. Marcus nods, accepting this with the easy trust of childhood, and Keisha sends him back to bed with a kiss on his forehead. The night stretches on, minutes feeling like hours, as Keisha monitors Emma's condition. David tries to stay awake, but exhaustion eventually claims him, his head dropping forward as he falls into an uneasy sleep on the other end of the couch. Keisha stays vigilant, changing the cool compress, checking Emma's breathing, making sure the fever doesn't spike again. She notices details about David that he probably doesn't realize are visible. His clothes, despite being soaked and torn from their trek through the storm, are clearly expensive. The fabric of his shirt feels like high-quality cotton when she helps adjust his blanket, and his shoes, now sitting by her door drying, are Italian leather. These observations make her uneasy, not because she cares about his wealth, but because wealthy white men don't usually end up on her doorstep, needing help, and when they do, it rarely ends well for people who look like her. Outside her window, the storm continues its assault on Detroit, snow piling up in drifts that reach 3 feet high against her fence. The streetlights flicker, threatening to go out completely, and Keisha prays her electricity holds. She thinks about her own situation as she sits there in the quiet, the weight of her life pressing down on her shoulders. Rent is due in 5 days, and she only has $317 in her checking account. The rent is $650. Her electricity bill is 2 months overdue. Sitting on her kitchen counter like a ticking time bomb, the red warning notice promising disconnection if she doesn't pay the $289 she owes. She works 2 jobs, has worked 2 jobs for the past 3 years since Marcus' father left. During the day, she waitresses at a diner on Jefferson Avenue, 6 days a week, 8-hour shifts that leave her feet aching and her back screaming. At night, 3 times a week, she works a warehouse job, loading boxes for an online retailer, 4 hours of backbreaking labor for $12 an hour. She's 28 years old and she feels 50. But watching Emma sleep now, her breathing easier, her color slowly returning, Keisha doesn't regret opening that door. Some things matter more than money, more than safety, more than the voice in her head that warns her this kindness will cost her. As dawn begins to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink, Emma's fever breaks, her temperature dropping to 99.8 degrees. David wakes up, sees his daughter sleeping peacefully, and tears fill his eyes. He looks at Keisha and opens his mouth to say something. But before he can speak, Keisha stands and looks out the window. Her blood runs cold. Across the street, Sandra Pemberton stands on her porch with a pair of binoculars pressed to her face, pointed directly at Keisha's house. Sandra, the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood, the woman who called the cops on Keisha's brother for playing his music too loud, the woman who organized the petition to keep a black-owned business from opening on their block. Sandra sees Keisha looking and doesn't even have the decency to pretend she wasn't spying. She lowers the binoculars, pulls out her phone, and starts making a call, her thin lips moving rapidly, her expression cold and satisfied, like she's just won something. Emma's fever has broken completely by the time morning fully arrives, the dangerous heat replaced by a slight warmth that speaks of recovery rather than crisis. She's weak but conscious, her eyes fluttering open to look around Keisha's living room with confusion. David sits beside his daughter, holding her hand, whispering reassurances that everything is okay now, that they're safe. Keisha moves to the kitchen, exhaustion pulling at every muscle in her body, but she knows these people need food. She opens her refrigerator and takes stock of what little she has. Half a carton of eggs, 3 slices of bread, a mostly empty bottle of orange juice, some butter. It'll have to be enough. She cracks the eggs into her only good pan, scrambles them with a fork, toasts the bread, and pours juice into mismatched glasses. It's not much, barely enough to feed 4 people, but she makes it stretch, giving the larger portions to David and Emma because they need it more. Marcus comes downstairs, dressed for school even though school will obviously be canceled, and his eyes light up when he sees breakfast. "We having company for breakfast?" "Mama?" he asks, and Keisha nods, telling him to wash his hands. They eat together at Keisha's small kitchen table, the 4 of them squeezed in tight, and David tries several times to explain who he is, mentioning something about a company and technology, but Keisha waves him off. Don't matter who you are, she says. You needed help. I helped. That's all. David insists on offering her money, pulling out his wallet, which somehow survived the storm intact. And Keisha sees a flash of credit cards and cash. No, she says firmly. People should help people. That's what my grandmother taught me. You don't charge someone for being human. David looks at her like she's said something profound, like she's some kind of saint, and Keisha feels uncomfortable with his gratitude. She's just done what anyone should do. Suddenly, loud, aggressive knocking rattles her front door, the kind of knocking that means trouble. Keisha's heart sinks. She opens the door to find Sandra Pemberton standing there with two other neighbors, Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down and Mr. Rodriguez from across the street. All of them white, all of them looking at Keisha with suspicion. Keisha, Sandra says, her voice dripping with false concern. We need to know what's going on here. I saw strange people entering your house last night during the storm. Keisha explains the situation, keeping her voice level. But Sandra barely listens. Instead, Sandra looks past Keisha into the house, spotting David and Emma. Sandra's entire demeanor changes. She pushes past Keisha without permission, walking right into the living room, and addresses David directly, completely ignoring Keisha's presence. Sir, are you okay? Sandra asks, her voice suddenly sweet and concerned. Did this woman hurt you or your daughter? We saw you enter her house last night and we've been worried. Keisha feels anger rising in her chest like bile. David stands up, confused by Sandra's implication, and tries to explain that Keisha saved them, that she's been nothing but kind. But Sandra cuts him off with a hand gesture. We just need to make sure you're safe, Sandra insists, pulling out her phone. I'm going to call the police, just to document everything. You understand. We have to protect our neighborhood, Keisha protests, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. Sandra, you can't just call the cops because I helped someone. This man and his daughter needed shelter from the storm. I didn't do anything wrong. But Sandra has already dialed, speaking into her phone with urgent tones, describing the situation in ways that make Keisha sound suspicious, using words like unusual and concerning, and we need someone to check this out. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez whisper to each other, shooting glances at Keisha that make her feel like a criminal in her own home. Mr. Rodriguez says to Mrs. Chen, not quite quietly enough, you never know these days, better safe than sorry. Marcus has come to stand beside his mother, pressing himself against her leg, and Keisha can feel him trembling. David steps forward, his voice firm now, telling Sandra that they're fine, that she needs to leave, that she's out of line. But Sandra refuses, planting herself on Keisha's couch like she owns the place, saying, I'm not leaving until the police arrive. We're protecting our neighborhood and making sure everyone is safe. The other neighbors nod in agreement, and Keisha realizes that nothing she says will matter. These are people who've already decided she's guilty of something, who look at her and see a threat rather than a neighbor, who see her skin color and make assumptions that no amount of truth can overcome. 20 minutes crawl by in tense silence, David trying to make small talk with Emma to distract her. Sandra and the neighbors, maintaining their vigil. Keisha standing rigid by her door, wondering how helping someone turned into this nightmare. Finally, a police cruiser pulls up outside, its lights flashing, and Keisha's stomach drops when she sees who steps out of the vehicle. Detective Mason Cole, tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered and hard, his eyes cold even from a distance. Keisha knows him in the way you know someone who's caused your family pain. 2 years ago, Cole arrested Keisha's younger brother Jamal on charges of assault after a white woman claimed Jamal had threatened her at a gas station. The charges were eventually dropped when security footage showed the woman was lying, that she'd actually been the aggressor. But not before Jamal spent 3 days in jail and lost his job. During the arrest, Cole had said things to Jamal, racist things that Keisha's mother overheard. Things like, your kind always causes problems, and maybe a few days in lockup will teach you some respect. Cole walks past Keisha without even acknowledging her presence, goes straight to David, and his whole demeanor is different, respectful and professional. Sir, Cole says to David, extending his hand for a handshake. I'm Detective Cole. I received a call about a potential situation here. Are you being held here against your will? Cole escorts David into the kitchen, leaving Keisha in the living room with Emma, Marcus, and the neighbors, who are watching everything with barely concealed satisfaction. Through the thin walls, Keisha can hear Cole's voice, gentle and concerned, asking David if he's sure he's okay, if anyone threatened him, if any money or valuables are missing. She hears David's frustrated responses, insisting everything is fine, but Cole keeps pushing, suggesting maybe Keisha had ulterior motives. Maybe David is just being polite. After 15 minutes, Cole returns and tells Keisha she needs to come into the dining room for questioning. Sandra offers to watch Marcus and Emma, and Keisha has no choice but to agree, even though the thought of leaving her son with these people makes her anxious. In the dining room, Cole closes the door, and his entire demeanor shifts. The professionalism he showed David evaporates, replaced by aggressive suspicion. He doesn't offer Keisha a seat, just stands there looming over her, his arms crossed. "So, Keisha Monroe," he says, pulling out a small notepad, "want to tell me what really happened last night?" Keisha explains everything, keeping her voice steady despite the fear rising in her throat. She tells him about hearing the knocking, finding David and Emma on her doorstep, the child's dangerous fever, calling 911, waiting for an ambulance that never came, using home remedies to break the fever. Cole writes notes, but his expression suggests he doesn't believe a word. "Why did you really let them in?" he asks, leaning forward. "A single black woman, struggling financially, and a well-dressed white man shows up at your door? Seems convenient." Keisha feels anger overriding her fear. Convenient? A child was dying. What was I supposed to do? Leave them in the storm? Cole shrugs. Like that might have been the better option. "I'm just saying, doesn't look good. You must have noticed he had money. That watch he's wearing probably costs more than you make in a year." The accusation is clear, and Keisha's hands ball into fists. "I noticed a sick child who needed help. That's all." Cole asks about her financial situation, how much money she has in the bank, whether she's behind on bills, whether she asked David for money. Each question feels like an attack, like he's building a case against her. She answers truthfully because lying will only make things worse, but she can see him taking her honesty and twisting it into something sinister in his mind. A poor single mother, bills piling up, and suddenly a wealthy man appears at her door. In Cole's worldview, Keisha must have seen an opportunity. He asks permission to search her home, and Keisha knows she has the right to refuse, but she also knows refusing will make her look guilty. She says, "Look wherever you want." Cole walks through her house, opening drawers, looking under furniture, checking closets. He picks up David's watch from where it sits on the coffee table and holds it up. "How did you come to acquire this?" he asks. And Keisha wants to scream. He was wearing it when he arrived. "You can ask him." Cole makes a note. Like this is evidence of something nefarious. He examines her electronics, her laptop that barely works, her old phone with the cracked screen, as if checking to see if she's recently acquired expensive items. He finds nothing because there's nothing to find. But his disappointment is palpable. He circles back to questioning her character, asking about Marcus' father, making judgmental comments about her being a single mother, implying moral failings. "Where's the boy's father?" Cole asks, and Keisha lifts her chin. "He left." "Not that it's any of your business." Cole smirks. Like this confirms something for him. He runs Keisha's name through his database on his phone, and his expression lights up when something appears. Well, he says. "Looks like your brother Jamal has a record. Arrested 2 years ago for assault. Your family has a history with law enforcement." Keisha's face burns. Those charges were dropped. He was innocent. Cole waves his hand dismissively. "Sure he was, but it shows a pattern, doesn't it? Your family attracts trouble." From the living room, raised voices interrupt the interrogation. David has overheard Cole's questions through the wall, and he comes storming in, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell is this?" David demands. "Why are you interrogating her like she's a criminal? She saved my daughter's life." End of story. Cole immediately shifts back to his professional demeanor. "Sir, I'm just conducting a standard investigation based on the call we received. We have to be thorough." David's voice rises. "Thorough? You're treating her like a suspect when she's a hero. Do you know who I am?" And then David says it. the words that change everything. I'm David Ashford, CEO of Ashford Technologies. This woman showed more compassion and humanity in one night than most people show in a lifetime. And you're treating her like a criminal. Cole's face goes pale and then red. Ashford Technologies is one of the largest tech companies in the country, worth billions. And David Ashford is a household name in business circles. Cole stammers an apology, his entire body language transforming into deference. Mr. Ashford, I apologize if my questioning seemed aggressive. We have to follow protocol when we receive calls. David doesn't accept the apology. Your protocol is racist harassment. This woman did nothing wrong. She opened her home to strangers in a storm. She used her own limited resources to help my daughter, and you're treating her like she had criminal intent. Cole backpedals rapidly, insisting he was just being cautious, that he meant no disrespect. He tells Keisha he's sorry if he seemed harsh, though his eyes don't match his words. David vouches completely for Keisha, explaining in detail how she saved Emma's life, how she refused money, how she showed pure, selfless kindness. Cole closes his notepad, his investigation apparently over now that he knows David's identity. Well, if you're satisfied that everything is fine, Mr. Ashford, then we'll close this matter, Cole says, already backing toward the door. Sandra and the neighbors look shocked, having heard David reveal his identity. They mumble apologies and excuses, suddenly embarrassed by their assumptions. But as everyone prepares to leave, Cole pauses by the door and catches Keisha alone for just a moment. He leans in close, his voice low so only she can hear. You got lucky this time, he whispers, his breath hot on her face. But a woman like you with a rich white man in your house? People are going to talk, and when they do, when someone files another complaint, it'll be back. Count on it. The threat is clear, and Keisha's stomach turns. Cole walks out, and through her window, she sees him talking to Sandra on the sidewalk. Sandra is gesturing animatedly, clearly upset about something, and then she pulls out her phone again. Within an hour, a news van from a local station pulls up to the street, a reporter and cameraman emerging, clearly having been tipped off about a story. The reporter approaches several neighbors, asking questions, and Keisha watches through her window as Sandra talks to the camera, her expression serious and concerned, spinning some narrative that Keisha can't hear but can easily imagine. The news crews arrive in force by early afternoon. 3 vans from different local stations parked along Keisha's street, reporters doing stand-ups in front of her house, while camera operators capture footage of the snowy neighborhood. They knock on Keisha's door repeatedly, asking for interviews with the Good Samaritan who rescued a billionaire. David, still inside with Emma who needs rest before they can travel, answers the door and agrees to speak with them, hoping to set the record straight. He stands on Keisha's small porch, snow still falling lightly, and tells the reporters exactly what happened. This woman, Keisha Monroe, saved my daughter's life, David says directly into the cameras, his voice clear and emphatic. She opened her home to complete strangers during a dangerous storm. She used her own resources to care for a sick child, and she asked for nothing in return. She's a hero, plain and simple. The reporters nod and take notes, asking follow-up questions about Emma's condition and how David ended up stranded in this particular neighborhood. But Keisha, watching from inside, notices how the reporters' questions gradually shift. They ask about how Keisha and David met, whether they knew each other before, what their relationship is now. The questions carry implications that make Keisha uncomfortable. David shuts down those lines of inquiry, stating firmly that they were complete strangers and that Keisha acted out of pure humanitarian instinct. The interview ends and the reporters pack up, thanking David for his time. By evening, the story airs on all the local news stations, and Keisha watches with growing horror as the narrative gets twisted. The headlines flash across the screen. Local woman shelters billionaire during storm and tech CEO and daughter rescued by Detroit resident. The stories themselves aren't terrible. They report the basic facts accurately. But the framing feels wrong somehow, emphasizing the differences between Keisha and David, making her poverty and his wealth the central focus rather than the simple act of helping another human being. Worse, the stories go viral on social media. Someone posts a screenshot of the news segment with Keisha's photo, And within hours, thousands of comments flood in. Keisha makes the mistake of reading them on her phone while Marcus sleeps upstairs. Most comments are positive, calling her a hero, praising her kindness. But a disturbing number of comments suggest ulterior motives. She saw an opportunity and took it. One comment reads, with hundreds of likes, "Gold digger spotted a rich white man and pounced." Another says, "Typical." A particularly vicious comment states, "She probably planned the whole thing." The racist comments are worse, using slurs and making assumptions about Keisha's character based solely on her skin color. Someone digs up information about her financial struggles, posts about her 2 jobs and overdue bills. Using her poverty as evidence of malicious intent, someone else finds photos of Keisha from her social media and creates a meme suggesting she's trying to trap David. The speculation spreads like wildfire. People who've never met Keisha, who know nothing about her life, feel entitled to judge her motivations and character. Gossip sites pick up the story, running headlines that make Keisha's stomach turn. Billionaire rescued by struggling single mother. Romance brewing. And David Ashford's mystery woman. What we know. The stories include photos of Keisha's modest home, contrasting it with images of David's corporate headquarters and estimated net worth. The implication is clear. Keisha must want something from David. Because why else would their paths cross? David sees the coverage too and he's furious, posting statements on his social media, trying to correct the narrative. But the internet has already decided on its story. By the second day after the storm, the situation escalates from uncomfortable to catastrophic for Keisha. Her boss at the diner, a middle-aged white man named Gary who's always been cordial if not warm, calls her at home. "Keisha, we need to talk," Gary says, his voice uncomfortable. "Some of our regular customers have seen the news coverage about you. They're concerned. They're saying they don't feel comfortable with you serving them." Keisha's heart drops. "Gary, I didn't do anything wrong. I helped a family in need." Gary sighs. I know, but you gotta understand. I run a business. If customers are uncomfortable, that affects my bottom line. I think it's best if you take some time off. Just until this blows over." Keisha's voice rises despite her efforts to stay calm. "Time off? For how long?" There's a pause. Unpaid, obviously. Maybe a few weeks? Maybe a month? Well, see how things go. Keisha hangs up, her hands shaking. Without the diner job, she loses over $1,000 a month. 2 hours later, her supervisor at the warehouse calls with almost the identical message. "People have seen the news," Frank says, "and they're worried about working with you. Management thinks it's best if you take a leave of absence." In less than 48 hours after the story breaks, Keisha loses both her jobs. The money she desperately needs to pay rent and bills, the income she's fought so hard to maintain, disappears because strangers decided her act of kindness must have had selfish motivations. David learns about Keisha losing her jobs and rushes over to her house. Emma recovered enough now to walk on her own. "This is my fault," David says, pacing Keisha's living room. "I should have never done those interviews. I made things worse." Keisha sits on her couch, numb. Marcus is at school, and she's grateful he's not here to see her falling apart. "It's not your fault," she says quietly. "People see what they want to see." David pulls out his checkbook. "Let me help you. Let me pay you for what you did. Let me cover your bills until you find new work." But Keisha refuses, standing up and backing away like the money is poison. "No, don't you understand? This is exactly what they wanted. If I take your money now, it proves them right. They'll say I was after your money all along, that I manipulated this whole situation." David argues, saying that's ridiculous, that Keisha needs help and he wants to provide it, that she saved Emma's life and he owes her everything. But Keisha is adamant, "Taking your money will destroy what's left of my reputation. It'll confirm every racist assumption people made about me." They argue back and forth, David insisting, Keisha refusing, until finally they reach a compromise. David will loan her money, not give it, with a proper loan agreement and everything legal and documented. And he'll help her find new employment, maybe something at his company. Keisha doesn't want charity, but she's also not stupid. She needs money to survive, and false pride won't feed her son. She agrees, reluctantly, to the loan. David transfers $5,000 to her account that afternoon, enough to cover rent and utilities and food for a couple of months. He also offers her a job at Ashford Technologies, a position as an administrative coordinator with good pay and benefits. The salary is $45,000 a year, more than she's ever made. Keisha is hesitant, worried about what people will say, but David insists the job is legitimate and she's qualified. "You'll be working for the company, not for me personally," David explains. "You'll have a real job with real responsibilities. You're not a charity case." Keisha accepts, grateful but anxious about what comes next. For a few days, things seem to stabilize. Keisha pays her landlord, Mr. Patterson, the overdue rent plus the current month, thinking this will solve at least one problem. But 3 days after David leaves town to return to his regular life, Keisha receives an envelope in the mail. Inside is an eviction notice. She reads it 3 times, not believing what she's seeing. Mr. Patterson is evicting her, giving her 30 days to vacate the property. The stated reason is violation of lease terms and creating a disturbance in the neighborhood. Keisha marches to Mr. Patterson's office, the eviction notice clutched in her hand. Patterson sits behind his desk, a man in his mid-60s with thinning gray hair and cold eyes. "This is illegal," Keisha says, slapping the notice on his desk. "I paid my rent. I haven't violated any terms." Patterson leans back in his chair, a slight smile on his face. "The lease includes a clause about not engaging in activities that bring negative attention to the property. The media circus you created violates that clause." Keisha's voice shakes with anger. "I didn't create anything. I helped someone. That's not a violation." Patterson shrugs. "I've received complaints from other tenants. They're concerned about the negative attention, the news crews, the disruption. I have a right to protect my property and my other tenants." Keisha knows this is retaliation, knows Patterson just doesn't want a tenant who's been in the news, who might attract more attention, who's now associated with controversy, but knowing it doesn't mean she can fight it. Eviction proceedings are complicated and expensive, requiring a lawyer she can't afford. "You can't do this," Keisha says, but her voice lacks conviction because they both know he can. Patterson's smile widens. "You have 30 days. Maybe your billionaire friend can buy you a new house." The dismissal is clear, and Keisha leaves his office, the eviction notice heavy in her hand, wondering how helping a child turned her entire life upside down. Keisha spends the next 2 weeks in a haze of rejection and despair. She applies to every job she can find online, positions at restaurants, retail stores, offices, anywhere that's hiring. She has years of work experience, reliable references from before the media incident, and she's qualified for most of the positions. But every time she goes in for an interview, she can see the moment when the hiring manager recognizes her face. Their expressions change, becoming guarded, and the interviews end quickly, with promises to call that never materialize. At a coffee shop interview, the manager outright says, "You're that woman from the news, aren't you? The one with the billionaire." When Keisha confirms it, the manager shakes her head. "I'm sorry, but we can't have someone with your publicity working here. You're too controversial." At a department store, the HR representative is more polite, but the message is the same. "We've decided to go with another candidate, someone with less visibility." The unspoken message is clear. Her 15 minutes of fame have made her unemployable. Businesses don't want the attention she brings, don't want to deal with potential controversy, don't want the kind of scrutiny that comes with hiring the woman who sheltered a billionaire. Keisha's savings, even with David's loan, dwindle rapidly. The eviction date looms closer, and she spends her days searching for a new apartment she can afford. Detroit has plenty of cheap rentals, but most of them are in neighborhoods she doesn't want to raise Marcus in. Places where gunshots ring out regularly and the schools are failing. She finds a smaller apartment in a rougher area. Not ideal, but within her budget. The rent is $450 a month for a cramped 2-bedroom with stained carpets and a kitchen that smells like mold. The neighborhood has a reputation for gang activity, and the school district is one of the worst in the city. But Keisha has no choice. She signs the lease, her hand shaking as she writes her name, feeling like she's signing away her son's future. Moving day arrives and Keisha packs up their lives into cardboard boxes and garbage bags. Some of her neighbors come to help. People who know her, who've lived on this street long enough to know she's a good person. They load boxes into a borrowed pickup truck, their faces sympathetic. But across the street, Sandra Pemberton stands on her porch watching, her arms crossed, a satisfied smile on her thin lips. Sandra catches Keisha's eye and actually waves, a little wiggle of her fingers that feels like a victory gesture. Keisha doesn't wave back, just turns away and continues loading boxes. The new apartment feels like a prison compared to her old house. The walls are thin enough that she can hear every argument and every television show from the neighboring units. The windows don't seal properly, letting in cold drafts that make the poorly functioning heater work overtime. Marcus looks around his new bedroom, much smaller than his old one, and tries to put on a brave face. "It's okay, Mama," he says. But his eyes are sad. Keisha enrolls Marcus in his new school, Franklin Elementary, and her heart breaks when she sees the condition of the building. The playground equipment is rusted and broken, the classrooms are overcrowded, and the teachers look exhausted and underpaid. Marcus' old school wasn't perfect, but it was better than this. Still, she has no alternative. She walks Marcus to class on his first day, kisses his forehead, and promises everything will be okay, even though she's not sure she believes it herself. That night, Keisha lays out her best professional outfit for her first day at Ashford Technologies. The job starts tomorrow, and it feels like her last chance to salvage her life. The position comes with a real salary, health insurance, and the possibility of stability. She can rebuild from here, she tells herself. She can make this work. She bought the outfit specifically for this job, spending money she couldn't afford because she needs to make a good impression. The black slacks and blue blouse are simple but professional, and she's polished her only pair of dress shoes until they shine. She sets her alarm for 5 in the morning to give herself time to get ready, drop Marcus at school, and take the bus to Ashford Technologies headquarters downtown. Sleep doesn't come easily. She lies in her unfamiliar bed, listening to her unfamiliar neighbors, wondering what tomorrow will bring. When her alarm finally goes off, she rises exhausted but determined. She showers in the cramped bathroom, styles her hair carefully, and dresses with precision. Marcus eats cereal for breakfast, the cheap store brand that Keisha bought with her dwindling funds, and she packs him a lunch of a sandwich and an apple. They walk together to Franklin Elementary, Keisha in her professional outfit and Marcus in his slightly worn school clothes, both of them trying to be brave. She drops him off, watches him walk into the building, and then rushes to catch the bus downtown. The ride takes 45 minutes, longer than her old commute, and she uses the time to review the job description David sent her. Administrative coordinator means she'll be managing schedules, organizing meetings, handling correspondence, and supporting various departments. It's office work, cleaner and easier than waitressing or warehouse loading, and the pay is better. She can do this job well. She knows she can. The bus drops her off 2 blocks from Ashford Technologies headquarters, a gleaming glass tower in downtown Detroit that reaches 35 stories into the sky. The building is impressive, modern and sleek, with the Ashford Technologies logo displayed prominently above the main entrance. Keisha walks through the revolving door into a vast lobby with marble floors and contemporary art on the walls. A security desk sits near the elevators, staffed by 2 guards in crisp uniforms. Keisha approaches and gives her name, explaining she's starting today as a new employee. The guard checks his computer, finds her information, and issues her a temporary ID badge. 18th floor, he says, pointing to the elevators. Human resources will get you set up. Keisha thanks him and crosses the lobby, her shoes clicking on the marble, feeling out of place among the well-dressed professionals hurrying to their offices. She rides the elevator to the 18th floor, her stomach fluttering with nerves. The doors open to a reception area with comfortable seating and the Ashford Technologies logo on the wall. A young woman at the reception desk greets her with a professional smile. "Keisha Monroe," the receptionist asks, and when Keisha nods, the woman stands. "Perfect. I'm Jennifer. I'll be handling your orientation today. If you'll follow me." Jennifer leads Keisha through a series of hallways, explaining the building layout, the location of break rooms and bathrooms, the security procedures. They arrive at an office where a woman in her 40s with dark hair sits behind a desk. "This is Patricia Reeves, our HR director," Jennifer says, and then excuses herself. Patricia stands, shaking Keisha's hand, her smile polite but measured. "Welcome to Ashford Technologies. Please, have a seat." As Keisha sits down, preparing for what she expects will be standard new hire paperwork, the office door opens again, and a tall white man in an expensive suit walks in without knocking. Hez in his mid-40s with silver hair and sharp features, his presence commanding immediate attention. "I'm Richard Ashford," he says, his voice cool and measured. "David's brother, and a member of the board of directors." He doesn't offer to shake Keisha's hand, just stands there looking down at her. "We need to talk about your position here. Some of us have concerns about my brother's judgment lately." Richard Ashford doesn't wait for a response. He gestures curtly for Patricia to leave, which she does immediately, closing the door behind her. Richard sits on the edge of Patricia's desk, looming over where Keisha remains seated. A deliberate power move. "Let me be direct," Richard says, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from years of being obeyed without question. "My brother David is a brilliant businessman, but he's also emotional. He makes decisions based on feelings rather than logic sometimes. This situation with you is one of those times." Keisha keeps her voice steady. "Mr. Ashford, I appreciate the job opportunity, and I'm here to work. I'm qualified for this position." Richard waves his hand dismissively. "Are you? You've worked as a waitress and a warehouse loader. This is a Fortune 500 company. Why should I believe you can handle the demands of this role?" The question is designed to make her feel small, inadequate, and it partially works. But Keisha has been underestimated her entire life. "I have organizational skills, customer service experience, and the ability to multitask under pressure. Those skills transfer to any industry." Richard smirks. "Customer service? We're not a diner, Miss Monroe. This is corporate America. The stakes are higher, the expectations are greater." He stands up, walking slowly around the desk, circling her like a predator. "Let me tell you what I think. I think my brother feels guilty about the media attention you received. I think he's trying to help you because he feels responsible. That's admirable in its way, but it's not how we run a business. We hire based on merit, not charity." Keisha's hands clench in her lap. "I'm not a charity case." Richard stops circling, facing her directly. "Then prove it. You'll start working today, and I'll be watching. Well, I'll be watching. One mistake, one complaint, one sign that you can't handle the job, and you're gone. Understood?" Before Keisha can respond, Richard opens the door and gestures for Patricia to return. "Get her set up," he tells Patricia, then looks back at Keisha. "Welcome to Ashford Technologies, Miss Monroe. I certainly hope you can meet our standards." He leaves, and the temperature in the room seems to rise by 10 degrees. Patricia returns to her desk, her expression carefully neutral, and begins processing Keisha's new hire paperwork. But Keisha notices how Patricia won't quite meet her eyes now, how her earlier friendliness has disappeared. Richard's visit has sent a message to everyone. Keisha is marked, watched, unwelcome. Patricia rushes through the rest of the orientation, explaining benefits and policies in a monotone, and then escorts Keisha to her cubicle on the 22nd floor. The cubicle is small, one of dozens in an open floor plan, with a desk, a computer, and a phone. Patricia introduces Keisha to her immediate supervisor, a woman named Jennifer Harris who greets Keisha with professional courtesy but no warmth. "I'll send you your first assignments by email," Jennifer says, and then she's gone, leaving Keisha alone in her cubicle. Keisha logs into her computer, finds her email, and starts reviewing the assignments. They're basic administrative tasks: scheduling meetings for various team members, organizing travel arrangements, filing expense reports. She completes them efficiently, demonstrating her competence, and sends the finished work back to Jennifer. The response comes quickly. "Please redo. Wrong format." Keisha looks at the examples Jennifer provided and realizes she followed them exactly, but she redoes the work anyway, trying different formatting. She submits again. Still incorrect. "Please be more careful." This pattern continues throughout the morning. Every task Keisha completes is sent back with vague criticism, forcing her to redo work that appears correct. She realizes quickly this is intentional, a way to make her look incompetent. Other employees walk past her cubicle, some glancing at her with curiosity, a few with sympathy, most with indifference. During her lunch break, Keisha sits alone in the cafeteria, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Detroit. The cafeteria serves fresh food, sandwiches and salads, and hot meals that smell amazing. Everything is subsidized for employees, incredibly cheap compared to outside restaurants. Keisha buys a turkey sandwich and sits at an empty table, grateful for a moment of peace. But as she eats, she overhears conversations from nearby tables. "That's her," someone whispers. "The woman who sheltered David Ashford. I heard Richard is furious about her being here," another voice says. "Apparently she's completely unqualified. David hired her out of pity. Did you see the media coverage? Some people think she planned the whole thing, like she knew who he was." The whispers continue, and Keisha forces herself to keep eating, to not react, to pretend she doesn't hear them. After lunch, the harassment escalates. Jennifer assigns Keisha to help organize a major client presentation happening in 2 days, providing her with a checklist of tasks and strict deadlines. Keisha works diligently, contacting vendors, reserving the conference room, arranging for catering, printing materials, but when she tries to confirm the conference room reservation, she discovers it was never actually available, that Jennifer gave her the wrong date. She has to scramble to find another space, finally securing a smaller room that's not ideal but workable. When she reports this to Jennifer, her supervisor looks annoyed. "The original room was supposed to be available. Why didn't you confirm earlier?" Keisha explains she did confirm, but Jennifer cuts her off. "Excuses don't help anyone. We need solutions, not excuses." The pattern continues. Keisha is given incomplete information, impossible deadlines, contradictory instructions. When she asks questions to clarify, she's told she should already know the answers. When she makes decisions independently, she's criticized for not consulting others. It's a no-win situation, carefully constructed to make her fail. Over the next several days, Keisha arrives early and stays late, working harder than she's ever worked, determined to prove herself. She brings Marcus to her mother's house in the mornings before work and picks him up late at night, barely seeing her son. Marcus complains he misses her, that he doesn't like staying at Grandma's so much. But Keisha has no choice. She needs this job to work. Other employees of color at Ashford Technologies begin to quietly reach out to Keisha. During a coffee break, a black man in his 30s introduces himself as James Walker, a software developer. "I've been here 5 years," James says quietly. "And I've seen Richard Ashford do this before. He doesn't like diversity. He finds ways to push out anyone who doesn't fit his image of what an Ashford Technologies employee should look like." A Latina woman named Maria Sanchez, who works in accounting, pulls Keisha aside after a meeting. "Richard drove away every minority hire in the last 3 years. He makes their lives miserable until they quit. Hess careful. Never says anything directly racist, but the pattern is clear. We've tried to report it, but HR protects him because Hess family." Keisha asks why they don't quit, and James laughs bitterly. "And go where? This is one of the best-paying companies in Detroit. We need these jobs. We just survive." The revelation is depressing but not surprising. Keisha begins documenting everything Richard and Jennifer do to her. She keeps detailed notes with dates and times, saves every email, records every vague criticism and impossible task. If they're going to push her out, she'll at least have evidence of their discrimination. 2 weeks into her employment, Richard corners her in a hallway. No one else is around, just the two of them in the corridor near the bathrooms. "You're still here," he says, his tone mocking. "I'm impressed. Most people would have quit by now." Keisha faces him directly. "I don't quit easily." Richard steps closer, invading her personal space. "You don't belong here, Miss Monroe. You're a waitress playing dress-up in the corporate world. Every day you stay, you embarrass yourself more. Leave now, before you make it worse." Keisha doesn't back down. "I'm doing my job well, despite your interference. If you have legitimate performance issues, document them, and well address them through proper channels." Richard's eyes narrow. "Careful. You're not irreplaceable. You're barely noticeable." He walks away, leaving Keisha shaking with anger but also fear. She knows Richard is escalating, knows something worse is coming, but she doesn't know what form it will take. The answer comes 3 days later when she's called to a meeting with Jennifer and an HR representative named Thomas Crawford. The meeting is in a small conference room, cold and sterile, and Keisha's stomach drops when she sees Richard sitting at the head of the table. "Miss Monroe, thank you for joining us," Thomas says in a formal tone. "We've received multiple complaints about your performance and behavior since you started working here. Employees have reported that you've been aggressive in your communications, made them uncomfortable with your attitude, and failed to complete assignments to our standards." Keisha's heart races. "That's not true. I've completed every assignment and I've been nothing but professional." Richard slides a document across the table. "We have written statements from several employees. Your behavior has created a hostile work environment. We're placing you on probation for 30 days. During this time, your work will be closely monitored, and any further complaints will result in immediate termination." The document requires her signature, acknowledging the probation and accepting responsibility for the alleged behavior. Keisha picks up the paper, reading it carefully. The complaints are vague and unspecific, using phrases like aggressive tone and unprofessional demeanor, without citing concrete examples. She knows this is a setup, a paper trail to justify firing her later. "I want to see these employee statements," Keisha says, setting the document down unsigned. "I have a right to know who's accusing me and what specifically I'm alleged to have done." Richard's face hardens. "That information is confidential. Employees made these complaints with the expectation of anonymity." Keisha looks at Thomas. "Then I want time to review this with an attorney before I sign anything." Thomas glances nervously at Richard, then back to Keisha. "The probation goes into effect regardless of whether you sign. The signature is just an acknowledgement that you've been informed." Keisha stands up. "Then I acknowledge I've been informed, but I'm not signing anything that admits to behavior I didn't engage in. If you want to put me on probation, fine, but I'm documenting this entire process, and I'm seeking legal counsel." Richard stands too, his voice cold and threatening. "Miss Monroe, this kind of hostile attitude is exactly what we're talking about. You're being insubordinate right now, in front of witnesses." Keisha keeps her voice level despite the fear coursing through her. "I'm asserting my rights." "There's a difference." Richard's jaw clenches. "We're done here. Get back to work. Any further resistance will result in immediate termination for insubordination." Keisha walks out of the conference room, her legs shaking, and goes directly to the bathroom where she locks herself in a stall and fights back tears. She's being systematically destroyed, and there's little she can do to stop it. Richard has power, resources, and the protection of his family name. She's one woman trying to fight an entire system designed to exclude people like her. But as she sits there in the bathroom stall, Keisha makes a decision. She's not going to quit. She's not going to sign false confessions. She's going to fight back, even if it costs her everything. Keisha leaves work that day with her documentation folder clutched against her chest like armor. The folder contains printouts of every email, copies of every assignment she completed correctly, notes on every conversation where she was given contradictory instructions. It's not much, but it's evidence, proof that she's being set up. She takes the bus home, her mind racing with potential next steps. And when she walks into her cramped apartment, Marcus is sitting at the kitchen table doing homework with the help of a neighbor. Keisha pays to watch him after school. She thanks the neighbor, pays her the $20 they agreed on, even though it hurts her budget, and waits until they're alone. Marcus looks up at her with worried eyes. "Are you okay, Mama?" he asks, his child's intuition sensing her distress. Keisha forces a smile. "I'm fine, baby. Just a long day at work." That night, after Marcus goes to bed, Keisha sits at her laptop searching for employment attorneys in Detroit. Most of them charge consultations, fees she can't afford, $300 or more just to talk. She finds a few who offer free initial consultations and sends emails to all of them, explaining her situation briefly and asking for help. The responses trickle in over the next 2 days. Most attorneys decline, saying her case is too complicated or that they don't take on cases against companies as powerful as Ashford Technologies. One attorney tells her bluntly that fighting Richard Ashford would require resources she doesn't have. that discrimination cases are hard to prove and expensive to litigate, that she should just quit and move on. But one attorney, a young black man named James Tucker who recently started his own practice, responds differently. Miss Monroe, your case sounds like textbook discrimination and harassment. I'd like to meet with you to discuss it further. I work on contingency for cases like this, meaning you don't pay unless we win. Would you be available to come to my office? Keisha meets with James Tucker 2 days later during her lunch break, taking the bus to his office in a modest building on the east side. James is 32, earnest and idealistic, and he listens to Keisha's story with growing anger. This is discrimination, he says when she finishes. Classic hostile work environment based on race. Richard Ashford is creating impossible working conditions to force you out. Keisha shows him her documentation, and James reviews it carefully, taking notes. This is good, he says. Very good. You've been smart about documenting everything. But we need more. We need to prove a pattern of discrimination. Show that Richard has done this to other employees. Over the next week, James investigates while Keisha continues working at Ashford Technologies. Enduring the escalating harassment, James discovers that Richard has been sued 3 times in the past 7 years by former employees of color, all alleging discrimination. The cases were settled out of court with strict non-disclosure agreements, the settlements ranging from $50,000 to $200,000. The pattern is clear and damning. James also begins interviewing current employees who are willing to talk, including James Walker and Maria Sanchez, gathering their stories of how Richard systematically pushes out minorities. Meanwhile, Keisha's situation at work deteriorates rapidly. She receives the same suspicious, threatening messages on her social media accounts, racist comments from anonymous users telling her to quit, to know her place, to stop making trouble. Someone posts her new address online, along with photos of her apartment building, and the harassment migrates from digital to physical. She finds racist graffiti spray-painted on her apartment door one morning, the N-word, in large dripping letters, and she has to explain to Marcus why someone would write such hateful things. Marcus comes home from school crying one afternoon, explaining that some kids called him names, said his mama is a gold digger, repeated things they heard their parents say. Keisha holds her son while he cries and wonders if continuing this fight is worth the pain it's causing her child. She considers dropping everything, moving to a different city, starting over where no one knows her story. But that night, James Tucker calls with news. I found something, he says, excitement in his voice. The signatures on that lawsuit against you, the one claiming David Ashford was suing you for defamation? I compared it to David's actual signature on corporate documents. It's forged. David never signed that lawsuit. Richard used a power of attorney David gave him during his business travels to file the suit in David's name without David's knowledge. Keisha's blood runs cold. Can we prove that? James says he can. That he's already contacted a handwriting expert who confirmed the signature doesn't match David's actual handwriting patterns. This is fraud, James explains, and it gives us leverage. We can file a motion to dismiss the lawsuit and notify David's executive team about the forgery. Over the next several days, James files the necessary legal motions. While Keisha continues enduring workplace harassment, Jennifer assigns her to organize a major investor meeting scheduled for the following week, providing a massive checklist of tasks with impossible overlapping deadlines. Keisha works 12-hour days trying to complete everything, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee and determination. Richard appears periodically to criticize her work, finding fault with every detail, demanding changes that contradict his previous instructions. During this nightmare period, David remains unreachable in Asia, managing some major corporate acquisition that keeps him in Singapore and Hong Kong for weeks. Keisha has tried calling his private number multiple times, leaving messages explaining what's happening, but she gets no response. She doesn't know if Richard is intercepting her calls or if David is simply too busy with work to listen to his messages. The harassment reaches a crescendo one Thursday afternoon when Keisha is working late alone in the office, most employees already gone home. Richard enters her cubicle, standing too close, his presence menacing. "You're still here," he says, his voice low and dangerous. "Why haven't you quit yet?" Keisha doesn't look up from her computer. "Because I haven't done anything wrong." Richard laughs, a cold sound without humor. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about right or wrong. This is about power. I have it, you don't. I can make your life so miserable that you'll beg to leave. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. Keisha finally looks at him, meeting his eyes. I'm not begging you for anything. Richard's expression darkens. You're making a mistake. Every day you stay, you make things worse for yourself. That little boy of yours, Marcus, how do you think all this attention is affecting him? The bullying at school, the stress at home? Is your pride really worth destroying your son's childhood? The mention of Marcus makes Keisha's hands ball into fists under her desk. Don't you dare talk about my son, Richard smirks. I'm just pointing out reality. You're being selfish, clinging to a job you're not qualified for, putting your child through hell because you're too stubborn to admit you don't belong here. Keisha pulls out her phone, turns on the voice recorder, and sets it on her desk in plain view. Say that again, please. Richard sees the phone and his face goes red. Are you recording me? Keisha nods. I'm documenting this conversation. You're threatening me and using my child to intimidate me. Would you like to continue? Or would you prefer I send this recording to HR? Richard's hand shoots out and he grabs the phone, but Keisha is faster, snatching it back. That's assault, she says calmly. And we have security cameras in this office. Touch me or my property again, and I'll file charges. Richard backs up, his composure slipping. You think you're clever? You think recording me proves anything? I'll have you fired for insubordination right now? Keisha stands up, gathering her things. Fire me then. But know that I have an attorney. I have documentation of everything you've done, and I'm prepared to file a lawsuit against you and this company for discrimination, harassment, and creating a hostile work environment. I also have evidence that you forged your brother's signature on legal documents, which is fraud. So go ahead, fire me. I dare you. Richard's face goes pale and then purple with rage. He demands she hand over her phone, claiming she recorded him without consent and that's illegal in Michigan. Keisha has researched this, knows that Michigan allows one-party consent for recordings, meaning she can legally record conversations she's participating in. She tells Richard this, and watches his confidence waver. Security arrives, called by Richard, and he demands they escort Keisha from the building immediately for threatening him. The security guards, both of whom are black, look uncomfortable with the situation. One of them, an older man named Dennis, says, Mr. Ashford, we need to follow proper termination procedures. We can't just remove an employee without documentation. Richard explodes, screaming at Dennis about insubordination, about not following orders, about how hell have Dennis fired too if he doesn't do what he's told. The scene attracts attention, employees from other floors hearing the commotion and coming to investigate. Within minutes, a crowd has gathered, watching Richard Ashford scream at Keisha and the security guards, his professionalism completely abandoned, his racism barely disguised in his choice of words. Someone in the crowd starts recording on their phone. Richard notices, and the reality of the situation seems to hit him. Hess being recorded having a public meltdown in his own company. He tries to regain composure, straightening his tie, clearing his throat. Miss Monroe, you're fired, effective immediately, for insubordination and threatening a board member, Richard says formally. Security, please escort her from the building and confiscate her badge and any company property. Dennis approaches Keisha gently. Mom, I'm sorry, but I need you to come with me. Keisha nods, maintaining her dignity. She hands over her temporary ID badge, picks up her purse and documentation folder, and walks toward the elevators with Dennis and the other guard flanking her. As she passes the crowd of employees, she speaks loudly enough for everyone to hear. I'm being fired because I'm black and because Richard Ashford can't stand that his brother cares about someone who doesn't look like all of you. I've been harassed, sabotaged, and threatened since the day I started. I have evidence of all of it, and I will be filing complaints with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Anyone who has experienced similar treatment from Richard Ashford, please contact my attorney, James Tucker. She recites James' phone number from memory, and several employees pull out their phones to write it down. Richard's face is murderous, but he can't do anything now. Not with so many witnesses and phones recording. The elevator doors close on the scene and Keisha rides down to the lobby in silence, the security guard saying nothing. In the lobby, Dennis speaks quietly. For what it's worth, Mom, I believe you. A lot of us have seen how he treats people who don't look like him. Keisha thanks him and walks out of Ashford Technologies for what she thinks is the last time. She sits in her car in the parking lot, the reality of being fired hitting her, and she shakes with rage and humiliation. She has no job, no income, a son to support, rent due in 2 weeks, and a legal battle ahead that will take months or years to resolve. She calls James Tucker and explains what happened. James is quiet for a moment, then says, "This is actually good for our case. Richard fired you in front of witnesses, after you mentioned filing discrimination complaints. That's retaliation, which is illegal. We have him now." Keisha doesn't feel victorious. She feels destroyed. She drives home, picks up Marcus from the neighbor's apartment, and holds her son while he asks if she's okay. She lies and says yes, because what else can she tell a 6-year-old child who's already been through too much? That night, she can barely sleep, lying in the dark wondering how she'll pay bills, how she'll feed her son, how she'll survive. But around 3 in the morning, her phone rings. She answers groggily, expecting a wrong number, and hears David Ashford's voice, frantic and apologetic. "Keisha, I just landed in Detroit. I got your messages, all 37 of them. My assistant finally forwarded them to me. I had no idea what Richard was doing. I'm coming to your apartment right now. What's the address?" Keisha gives him the address, too tired to argue, and 30 minutes later there's a knock on her door. She opens it to find David standing there, still in his business suit from the flight, his face haggard with exhaustion and horror. "I didn't know," David says immediately. "Richard told me you quit after a few days. Said you couldn't handle corporate work. I didn't sign any lawsuit against you. I never authorized any of that. I had no idea he was harassing you, sabotaging your work, threatening you." Keisha lets him in, too exhausted for anger. "I tried to reach you." David runs his hands through his hair. "Richard was filtering my communications. I gave him temporary authority while I was handling the Singapore acquisition, and he used it to keep information from reaching me." "Keisha, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have been paying attention." Keisha sinks onto her couch. "He fired me today, in front of half the company." David's expression darkens with fury. "He what?" She tells him everything. Shows him the recordings on her phone, the documentation in her folder, James Tucker's findings about the forged signatures and Richard's history of discrimination. David listens with growing rage, his jaw clenched so tight Keisha thinks he might crack his teeth. When she finishes, David pulls out his phone. "I'm calling Richard right now. I'm firing him. I'm pressing criminal charges for fraud and forgery." But Keisha stops him, her hand on his phone. "Wait," she says. "Don't." David looks at her in confusion. "What? Why?" Keisha meets his eyes, and in her gaze is steel and determination. "I don't just want Richard stopped. I want him exposed. If you confront him now, hell, destroy evidence, pay people off, make this disappear like he's done before with those settlements." She straightens her shoulders, exhaustion replaced by fierce purpose. "I want justice, not just for me, for everyone he's destroyed. Help me take him down properly." David sits on Keisha's worn couch, processing her words, and slowly he nods. "What do you need?" Over the next week, Keisha, David, and James Tucker work together in secret, building a comprehensive case against Richard Ashford. David provides James with executive access to company records that reveal a pattern of discrimination spanning Richard's entire tenure at Ashford Technologies. The records show that under Richard's oversight, minority hiring dropped 68% compared to other departments, and minority retention rates were the lowest in the company. James finds documentation of payoffs Richard made to former employees, discovering that Richard embezzled company funds to finance the settlements, hiding the transactions in various accounting categories over several years. The total amount Richard stole to cover up his discrimination reaches over $3 million. David is horrified, learning that his own brother has been systematically destroying lives while stealing from the family company. They also discover that Richard forged not just David's signature on the lawsuit against Keisha, but also forged board approval documents for several major company decisions over the past 2 years, exceeding his authority repeatedly. James works with a forensic accountant to trace all the illegal transactions, building an airtight case. Meanwhile, Keisha reaches out to James Walker, Maria Sanchez, and other employees of color at Ashford Technologies, gathering their testimonies about Richard's behavior. Many are afraid to speak openly, worried about retaliation, but Keisha convinces them that strength comes from numbers, that together they can end Richard's reign of discrimination. 15 current and former employees eventually agree to provide statements, creating an overwhelming body of evidence. David schedules an emergency board meeting, telling Richard it's about the Singapore acquisition, giving no indication of the real agenda. Richard agrees, confident and unsuspecting. The meeting is set for Monday morning at 9 o'clock in the main conference room at Ashford Technologies headquarters. David instructs Keisha to attend with James Tucker as her attorney, saying she has every right to be there. Sunday night, Keisha barely sleeps, running through potential scenarios in her mind. She's risking everything on this confrontation. If it goes wrong, if Richard somehow slips away again, she'll have nothing left. But she thinks about Marcus, about the other employees Richard destroyed, about every person who's been pushed out of opportunities because of their skin color. And she knows this is bigger than just her. Monday morning arrives cold and gray, the first week of March bringing rain instead of snow. Keisha dresses in her professional outfit again, the same clothes she wore on her first day at Ashford Technologies. She drops Marcus at her mother's house, explaining that today is important, and her mother squeezes her hand with understanding. "Make them pay, baby," her mother says, and Keisha nods. She takes the bus downtown, meeting James Tucker in the lobby of Ashford Technologies. Together they ride the elevator to the executive floor, where the boardroom is located. The boardroom is impressive, a large space with a polished mahogany table that seats 20 people, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Detroit, and original artwork on the walls. 7 board members are already seated when Keisha and James enter. Richard sits at one end of the table, looking relaxed and confident in an expensive charcoal suit. His expression changes to confusion and then anger when he sees Keisha. "What is she doing here?" Richard demands, looking at David, who sits at the head of the table. David's face is calm, but his eyes are hard. "Miss Monroe is here as a witness and a victim. Mr. Tucker is here as her attorney. They have information the board needs to hear." Richard stands up, his voice rising. "This is inappropriate. She's a fired employee with a grudge. She shouldn't be anywhere near a board meeting." David gestures for Richard to sit. "Sit down, Richard. We're not discussing the Singapore acquisition today. We're discussing you." The other board members shift uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the tension. David nods to James Tucker, who stands and begins presenting the evidence. James methodically lays out Richard's pattern of discrimination, showing statistics on hiring and retention of minorities under Richard's oversight. He presents testimony from 15 employees detailing harassment, sabotage, and hostile work environments. He shows the forged signatures on the lawsuit against Keisha, providing the handwriting expert's analysis. He reveals the embezzled funds Richard used to pay off previous discrimination settlements, tracing every illegal transaction. The presentation takes 45 minutes, and by the end, the board members look stunned and horrified. Richard's face has gone from red to pale, his confidence evaporating. He tries to interrupt several times, but David shuts him down, instructing him to let the presentation finish. When James sits down, David stands. "Richard, you've broken numerous laws, violated corporate policies, and damaged countless lives. You've stolen from this company to cover up your illegal discrimination. You've forged my signature and exceeded your authority. You're done." Richard finally finds his voice, standing up and pointing at Keisha. "This is all because of her. She's manipulated you, David. She's been after your money since the beginning, and now she's poisoned you against your own family." David's voice is ice cold. "This has nothing to do with Keisha personally. This is about a pattern of illegal behavior spanning years. She's just the first person brave enough to fight back." Richard changes tactics, his voice becoming pleading. "David, I'm your brother. We built this company together with Dad. You can't do this to family." David shakes his head. "You stopped being my brother when you started destroying innocent people's lives. Family doesn't do what you've done." One of the board members, an older woman named Margaret Chen, speaks up. We need to vote on this. I move that Richard Ashford be removed from the board immediately, and that we refer this matter to law enforcement for criminal prosecution. Another board member seconds the motion. Richard panics, looking around the table for allies. Two board members look uncertain. Men who've worked with Richard for years, who share his views even if they've been quieter about them. Richard appeals to them directly. You know this is wrong. You know what she is. David's been blinded by his feelings for this woman. Hes making emotional decisions that will hurt the company. David interrupts. If anyone votes against removing Richard, I'll resign as CEO, and I'll take this evidence directly to the media myself. I'll burn this company down before I let discrimination continue. The threat is clear and effective. The vote is called and it's unanimous. Richard Ashford is removed from the board, effective immediately. David then announces he's pressing criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Richard finally shows his true colors, his professional mask completely falling away. You're going to regret this, he snarls at David. You're choosing some black gold digger over your own blood. She's using you. You're too blind to see it. David doesn't rise to the bait. Instead, he picks up the phone on the conference table and makes a call. Security, please come to the boardroom. And Detective Cole, you can come in now. The door opens and Detective Mason Cole enters with two uniformed officers. Cole has been briefed on the situation by David's attorneys, and for once, he looks at Keisha with something approaching respect. Richard Ashford, Cole says formally, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. The officers move forward with handcuffs, and Richard backs away, still protesting, still claiming this is all a conspiracy. But the handcuffs click into place, and officers begin reading him his rights. As they escort Richard toward the door, he stops and looks at Keisha one last time. You've destroyed a family, he says bitterly. Keisha meets his gaze steadily. No, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. Richard is led away, and the remaining board members sit in stunned silence. Margaret Chen is the first to speak. David, this is going to be a public relations nightmare when this gets out. David nods. I know. We're going to get ahead of it. We're issuing a statement today explaining what happened, taking full responsibility for not catching Richard's behavior sooner, and announcing reforms to our hiring and workplace discrimination policies. He turns to Keisha. And we're offering Miss Monroe a formal apology and financial compensation for what she endured. Keisha stands, her voice clear and strong. I don't want money from this company. What I want is for you to create real change. I want you to hire independently auditors to review your entire organization for discrimination. I want you to establish a reporting system where employees can safely complain about harassment without fear of retaliation. I want you to fund diversity training for every employee and every manager. And I want you to make amends to every person Richard pushed out over the years. David smiles, genuine admiration in his expression. Done. All of it. Margaret speaks again. Miss Monroe, on behalf of the board, I apologize for what you went through. You showed incredible courage. The other board members echo the apology, and Keisha accepts it with a nod. The meeting concludes and people begin filing out of the room. David pulls Keisha aside as James gathers his materials. I owe you everything, David says quietly. You saved Emma's life, and now you've saved this company from my brother's corruption. What can I do for you? Keisha thinks about it. Really considers the question. She doesn't want David's money, doesn't want to prove Richard right about her motivations. But she does want something. Help me start a nonprofit, Keisha says. An organization that provides legal aid and job training for people who face workplace discrimination. Help me make sure other people don't have to fight these battles alone. David extends his hand. Partners. Keisha shakes his hand. Partners. Over the next several months, the fallout from Richard's arrest dominates Detroit business news. Richard is eventually convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Ashford Technologies implements sweeping reforms, becoming a model for corporate diversity and inclusion. The company reaches out to all 15 former employees Richard discriminated against, offering settlements and apologies. Media coverage of the case shifts dramatically. with reporters now praising Keisha for her courage in exposing corporate corruption. Think pieces are written about racism in corporate America, about the importance of whistleblowers, about systemic discrimination. Keisha becomes an unexpected advocate, giving interviews and speaking at events about her experience. With David's financial backing and connections, Keisha launches the Justice Works Initiative, a nonprofit providing free legal services and job training for victims of workplace discrimination. She hires James Tucker as the legal director and brings on Maria Sanchez and James Walker as advisors. The organization helps dozens of people in its first 6 months, fighting discrimination cases and helping people find new employment. Marcus thrives with the stability. His mother no longer working 2 jobs, no longer stressed and exhausted all the time. Keisha moves into a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, enrolls Marcus in a better school, and watches her son flourish. She doesn't become rich, doesn't want to, but she has enough, and that's more than enough. 1 year after the snowstorm that changed everything, Keisha receives a pale pink envelope in the mail, thick cardstock with elegant script. Inside is an invitation to Emma Ashford's 8th birthday party at David's estate. The invitation includes a personal note from Emma. "Please come. I want to show you my new room and my new puppy, and I miss you." Marcus reads the invitation over Keisha's shoulder and bounces with excitement. "Can we go, Mama? Please." Keisha has stayed in touch with David and Emma over the past year, occasional phone calls and a few dinners, but she's kept some distance, wanting to build her own life, rather than being forever connected to David as the woman who sheltered him. But Emma's invitation touches her heart, and she agrees they'll attend. The party is on a Saturday afternoon in early February, almost exactly a year since that snowy night. Keisha drives her newer car, not fancy but reliable, through the gates of David's estate in Bloomfield Hills. The property is stunning, 20 acres with a main house that looks like something from a magazine, all stone and glass and careful landscaping. Cars line the curved driveway, expensive vehicles belonging to David's friends and business associates. Keisha parks her modest sedan among the luxury cars and walks with Marcus toward the front door, both of them dressed nicely but not extravagantly. Emma answers the door herself, squealing with joy when she sees Keisha. She's grown several inches taller, healthy and vibrant, her blonde hair in braids with pink ribbons. She throws her arms around Keisha's waist and hugs tight. "You came. I was worried you wouldn't come." Emma grabs Keisha's hand and Marcus' hand and pulls them inside, chattering about everything she wants to show them. The house is full of people, adults and children, decorations and food, live musicians playing in one corner. David sees them arrive and makes his way through the crowd, his smile genuine and warm. "Keisha, Marcus, thank you for coming," he says, shaking Keisha's hand and then kneeling down to greet Marcus at eye level. "Marcus, Emma's been talking about you for weeks. She wants to show you her new gaming system." Marcus' eyes light up, and Emma drags him away toward the stairs, the 2 children running off together. David and Keisha stand in the entryway, the party swirling around them, and David's expression becomes serious. "How are you, really?" he asks. Keisha smiles. "I'm good, really good. The nonprofit is growing, we just hired 2 more staff members. Marcus is doing great in school. We're stable." David nods. "I'm glad. You deserve stability after everything you went through." They talk for a while, catching up on the past few months, and then David introduces Keisha to other guests. She meets business leaders, philanthropists, and community organizers, people David thinks she should know for her nonprofit work. Everyone treats her with respect, and if some of them recognize her as the woman from the news stories, they don't mention it. Later, after cake and presents, Emma finds Keisha sitting alone on the patio overlooking the snowy gardens. Emma climbs into the chair next to Keisha and hands her a folded piece of paper. "I made this for you," Emma says shyly. Keisha unfolds the paper to find a child's drawing done in colored pencils. The drawing shows Keisha opening a door, snow falling behind a man and a little girl, and above the door, Emma has written in careful letters, "Real angels don't have wings. They have warm houses." Keisha's throat tightens with emotion. She pulls Emma into a hug. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is the best gift anyone's ever given me." Emma hugs back fiercely. "You saved my life. Daddy told me. He said if you hadn't helped us, I might have died." Keisha doesn't know how to respond to that. the weight of it too much. So she just holds Emma and is grateful they're both here. Both alive, both okay. David joins them on the patio, seeing them together, and he waits until Emma runs off to play with other children before he speaks. Emma has a question she wants to ask you, and I support it completely. But I told her she needs to wait until she's ready. David says, sitting in the chair Emma vacated. She wants to know if you'll be her godmother. Keisha looks at him in surprise. David? I don't know what to say. David smiles. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. But Emma loves you. And honestly, I can't think of anyone I'd trust more to be a guiding presence in her life. Keisha is honored and overwhelmed. I need to think about it. David nods. Of course, take your time. He pauses, then continues. I also have something to ask you, separate from Emma's request. The board of directors at Ashford Technologies is expanding, and we want to add voices that represent perspectives we've been missing. We want people who understand the real world, who've experienced the challenges most of our employees face. We'd like you to consider joining the board. Keisha stares at him. Me? On your board of directors? David's expression is serious. Not as a favor, not as charity. Because we need your voice, your strength, your integrity. You understand workplace discrimination from lived experience. You understand corporate accountability. You understand what it takes to create real change. We need people like you making decisions, not just people who've spent their entire lives in boardrooms. Keisha's mind reels. A board position at a Fortune 500 company would bring influence, resources, a platform to create change beyond what her nonprofit can accomplish alone. But it also means staying connected to David and Ashford. Technologies being forever linked to this story. I need time to think about this too, Keisha says. David stands. Think about both questions. There's no pressure, no timeline. Whatever you decide, well, respect it. As the party winds down and guests begin leaving, Keisha collects Marcus, who's exhausted and happy from playing all afternoon. Emma gives Keisha one more hug goodbye, whispering, "Please say yes to being my godmother." In the car on the drive home, Marcus chatters about the party, about the games he played and the food he ate. Keisha listens, her mind processing everything that happened today, everything that's happened over the past year. Her phone buzzes with a text message and she checks it at a red light. It's from James Walker, her advisor at the nonprofit. Another client just called. She's facing discrimination at her company. She heard about us and wants help. That's 15 new clients this month. We're making a difference. Keisha smiles, putting her phone away as the light turns green. She thinks about Emma's drawing, about David's offers, about all the people her nonprofit has helped. She thinks about Richard in prison, about the reforms at Ashford Technologies, about the conversations happening in boardrooms across Detroit about diversity and inclusion. One act of kindness on a snowy night set all of this in motion, opening her door to strangers, risking her safety and her reputation, led to exposing corruption and creating lasting change. Later that night, after Marcus is asleep, Keisha sits on her couch and makes 2 phone calls. The first is to Emma. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Keisha. I've thought about your question, and my answer is yes. I would be honored to be your godmother." Emma's squeals of joy come through the phone, and Keisha hears David's voice in the background, pleased and grateful. The second call is to David directly. "I've thought about the board position." Keisha says, "My answer is yes to that too, but I have conditions. I want the board to commit to measurable diversity goals, and I want quarterly reviews to ensure we're meeting them. I want veto power over any settlements involving discrimination claims, so we can't just pay off problems anymore. And I want the board to fund similar nonprofits in other cities, expanding the model of what we're building here." David laughs, a sound of pure relief and excitement. "Done. All of it. Welcome to the board, Miss Monroe." Keisha hangs up and sits in her quiet apartment, listening to the sounds of her neighbors, the hum of the heater, the peaceful breathing of her son sleeping in the next room. She thinks about where she was a year ago, struggling to survive, working 2 jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. She thinks about who she is now, founder of a successful nonprofit, soon to be godmother to Emma, and a board member at one of the largest tech companies in America. None of it was planned. She didn't help David and Emma that snowy night expecting any reward. She did it because it was right, because a child was sick, because when you strip away all the complications of race and class and power, helping another human being is what we're supposed to do. One act of humanity in the face of prejudice exposed corruption, inspired courage, and started a revolution. Character isn't defined by color or class, but by the choices we make when no one's watching. Keisha made the choice to open her door, and that single moment of kindness changed not just 3 lives but hundreds, creating ripples that continue spreading outward, touching people she'll never meet, inspiring others to choose compassion over fear. She picks up her phone one more time, opens social media, and sees messages from people her nonprofit helped, thanking her, sharing their own stories of fighting back against discrimination. She reads each one, letting the gratitude fill her heart. Then she puts her phone away, walks to Marcus' room, and watches her son sleep peacefully, knowing she's given him something more valuable than money or status. She's shown him that standing up for what's right matters, that one person can make a difference, that kindness is never wasted even when it costs you everything. The story that started on a snowy night continues, unfolding in ways Keisha couldn't have imagined, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change the world. So let me ask you something, and I really want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you were in Keisha's position, that snowy night, would you have opened the door? Would you have risked everything to help a stranger, knowing how society might judge you, knowing the potential consequences? And more importantly, when was the last time you chose kindness when it wasn't convenient or safe? Share your stories in the comments, because we need more people willing to open doors both literally and figuratively. If this story moved you, if it made you think about discrimination, courage, or the power of simple human kindness, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories that challenge us to be better. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today, someone fighting their own battles against injustice, someone who needs to know that standing up matters. Thank you so much for watching, for listening to Keisha's story, and for being part of a community that believes in justice and human dignity. Remember, we all have the power to change lives through our choices, through our courage, and through our refusal to accept injustice. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never stop fighting for what's right.